A tough situation for his family a few generations ago is the reason that Blake Hurst is living in a far northwestern Missouri town. And he's doing what his grandfather did. He's farming. Blake remembers a time after finishing college, he had come back to the family farm and he was riding in a pickup truck with his dad. His dad taught him something about challenges that he has never forgotten, and it still helps him today. Hi, I'm Dave Price, and this is the American Farmland Owner Podcast. We're going to get to the lessons that Blake learned from his dad more than 40 years ago in a few minutes. But first, the challenge of today and tomorrow. It is how Blake says that he is already feeling higher tariffs, and he wants people to understand how those higher tariffs can affect a guy like himself. First, though, we're going to go back and trace these generations of lives on this Westboro, Missouri farm. All right, tell us a little bit about your background. Your family's been doing this for a while, right?
Yeah, in a really unfortunate occurrence for my grandfather, he had a bank failure and lost his farm in 1931 and moved to this area. And that was bad for him, but very good for us because the ground is more fertile here than where he was. So we traded up as a family. So we've been farming here. I'm always amused when people say I'm a fifth or sixth generation farmer. I have no idea. So my ass, I just say all of them. But we've been farming here since the 30s.
Where was the original farm? Where was your grandpa?
Well, he was over in Nottoway County, Missouri, which is and moved to the west to Atchison County, where we live now, which is the furthest north and west county in Missouri. So my farm headquarters is about 15 miles from Nebraska and about 5 from Iowa.
And as we talk today in mid-May, we're talking mid-morning. You've already put some time in, obviously, working out. You got everything planted, though, so that's a positive, right?
Yeah, we had a very early start. We've been dry, really been dry for 2 years, but have been very dry this spring. So everybody got an early start. I was mentioning earlier, we probably had 3.5, 4 inches of rain since the first of the year. You go 20 miles south into Holt County, Missouri, just north of St. Joseph, and they maybe had half that much.
Yeah, they're jealous of you.
Yeah, I talked to a guy my granddaughter was running track on Saturday, and I talked to a farmer that was actually replanting corn because it had been so dry he couldn't get it up. So he was putting it in really deep and hoping for a rain.
And you're corn, beans, and a nursery, right?
Yeah, we have a greenhouse business. My wife really likes plants, and so when we came back to the farm, we met at the University of Missouri and came back to the farm and started growing flowers at a very small scale. And it has grown now, and so we have we usually have 5 trucks on the road for about 3 weeks. It's a very condensed season. I was looking this morning, and 70% of my yearly sales are in accounts receivable right now. So I really wish that some of my customers, but we do it all in 3 weeks, and if they take 30 days to pay, I get a pretty impressive number in that accounts receivable column. But we grow just the bedding plants you would see at a local nursery: geraniums, impatiens, petunias, a lot of them, and in fact most of them in large containers. We sell them to our biggest customer does school fundraisers all over Iowa and Nebraska. So we go clear to Davenport, Iowa, and clear to the Mountain Time Zone in western Nebraska for her. Then we sell to landscapers, to garden centers, and a few grocery stores.
The first time I've ever been able to talk to you, but it makes me a little nostalgic. You've already brought up Mizzou once. That's where I got my grad school, my degree. And for those who are watching the video version of this podcast, your T-shirt bears my favorite team in the entire world since I grew up in St. Louis. So clearly you're a man of superior intellect, that even though you're basically in Kansas City Royals country, you got a Cardinal shirt on.
Yeah, well, that like I guess farming is kind of a family tradition. My grandmother was a rabid Cardinals fan, and
Yes, sir.
she passed that on to us. So we've lived and died with the Cardinals our whole lives.
All right, appreciate that. All right, let's get into your life a little bit. You got a nice diverse set of operations that I thought would make an interesting conversation with you. So you got the traditional corn and beans. You already talked about a buddy who, because things have been so dry, has already replanted. Always tough to know this time of year, but how are you thinking about things with corn and beans based on how dry it's been first before we start getting into the world matters?
Well, we're in the typical Midwestern 50-50 rotation,
Mm-hmm.
and then held to it this year because I do that, but as clearly for agronomic reasons, just to get the
Sure.
rotation fits. Prices aren't great. I've got most of this last year's crop priced either in the cash market or on the board, and have got a few hedges on for next year, and not at a profitable price. But then that really, I've been doing this for almost 50 years, and one of the things you learn is the market doesn't care what your break-even price is. So I'm always amused at people that say, well, they can't market without knowing your break-even price. Well, yeah, but sometimes it never gets there. So but this is farming, right? I mean, you have 4 or 5 years when you just trying to hang together, and then you have 2 good ones. So we had our 2 good ones in the last 5 years, and now we're waiting for the next turn of the cycle.
No, it's the hanging. Do you have younger relatives who are helping out or who could take over for you one day?
Yeah, we both my I have 3 children. I always say one's a failure. He's a lawyer and works for the Department of Justice. The other 2 are here, and both sons-in-law are farming and working in the house. And my daughter is kind of the boss at the greenhouse. And so I've got 3 family members working with us. And of course, my wife runs the greenhouse. And so 3 family members working with us. And I have 3 grandchildren, twins, and a first cousin who all graduated from high school last week. And 2 of them going to the University of Missouri, 1 of them going to diesel mechanic school. And I wouldn't be surprised if 1 or 2 of them ended up back in this area as well. So yeah, we're here for the long term.
Nice. All right, you have some good perspective after doing this a long time, but you already made a joke about the market price, but how do you sit here and assess? We got a new administration in Washington, D.C. We've got these tariffs, and one day it may be this, the next day it may be this. You're a guy running a business. Where does your head go? You work through the day, you're sitting there watching the evening news, and you're trying to catch up about what the heck's going to happen with everything. So how do you process all this?
Well, there's two problems. Well, there's more than that, but 2 we'll talk about here. 1, tariffs are stupid. This is bad economic policy. Makes no sense at all. And so we deal with that. And the other, and maybe even larger, is the uncertainty, as you mentioned. On the greenhouse business, we get all of our potting soil from Canada because that's where sphagnum and peat moss is.
Sure.
On the farming business, get all of our potash from Canada because that's where the biggest potash mines are. We get all of I mentioned that a lot of our stuff is grown in large containers, large pots, and they come from China. And in fact, we buy a container load, a shipping container load of plastic from China every year. They basically aren't available here in the U.S., even if we wanted to shop local, which I obviously would rather. So I don't know. Some of those things are going to be exempt from the tariff. Some of them have a 10% tariff. So the uncertainty, and obviously the tariff schedule today is considerably different than it was a week ago, at least for China. So we can't plan. And we know that a bunch of our economic policy is made by people who are in my mind, economically illiterate. So that's really hard to deal with.
Hey, can you talk a little bit about, you talked about the shipping containers. Are you talking about the actual flower pots or separately the bigger ones about how you get them out?
Yeah, the large plant, but most we grow. And I don't want to use jargon here that'll confuse your listeners, but we grow in flats. So, like
Yeah,
we buy a flat of tomatoes,
yeah,
36.
yeah.
We grow in 4-inch pots that you'd see on the parking lot of your Home Depot, and then we grow in large decorative containers. All the smaller stuff is made in Ohio, and so obviously we're not. Um, I mean, it basically is a function of the price of oil. So it will be same price or maybe even less than it was last year since the price of oil has been somewhat weaker. But the large pots, the decorative pots, which cost $2 or $3 a piece, and we'll grow, we buy about 20,000, 25,000 larger containers. They're the ones that are imported, and that's where the uncertainty comes.
And that's where, because of the volume there, now hopefully you got in, you should have, since you buy ahead, I'm assuming you
Well,
probably did all right before these kicked in.
Yeah, we'll order next year's pots. We'll wait to hear from our customer that buys most of them whether she wants to change. She will every 2 or 3 years, change because so she has something different to market.
Sure.
We'll wait to hear from her and then we'll start making arrangements. But you have to. That's one of the huge disadvantages from importing it. It's a 6-month lead time, so we've got to make decisions here pretty quickly.
But that's where I think that's a good illustration here, though, that if the tariffs continue, whatever the heck the percentage is going to be on those imports from China, that could be a substantial increase in purchase costs for you, right?
Could be. I mean, our hope is that they're one of the items that are
Exempt.
but we're not totally sure. So we're gonna, and we haven't even started the conversation because we don't know what our customer wants. Whether she'll want to stay with the same. I mean, she'll want the large pots, but sometimes they're square, sometimes they're round, sometimes they're brown, sometimes they're green. We're at her discretion and all that. She works with the final customer. So we haven't started the conversation yet.
Do you understand the fundamental, kind of one of the more generic arguments for people who do have faith in this whole tariff concept about it's leveling the playing field, bring production back home, we make more stuff here, we hire more people here, we buy from here, and we're overall better off?
The unemployment rate somewhere between 3 and 4%. So the first question you have to answer if we're going to reshore manufacturing is, what are we going to quit doing? Because we're at full employment. So what are we going to quit doing? What industry has to shut down in order to reshore the plastic pot industry? That's the first question. The second question is, there's about 500,000 job openings in manufacturing right now. I don't know about you. My next door neighbor, who happens to be a cousin of mine, worked at a factory his whole life, got an early buyout when he was 50, and it was the happiest day of his life. He hated his job. That is to me, I mean, that's obviously anecdotal, but that is to me, why do we want to quit doing what we're doing now for jobs that people don't want to do? It makes no sense. This idea that somehow manufacturing is, I don't know, manly and working in a bank in a service job or any of the other hundreds of millions of service jobs is just silly. There's a very famous anecdote, you can look it up, of one of in the first Trump administration, one of his staffers talking to him about working in a factory, and he said, well, it's a bad job. And President Trump literally could not understand why people wouldn't want to take a factory job, because it's, in his mind, steady and good wages and all that. But it's boring and it's repetitive and it's dangerous, and people don't want to do it. And the evidence is out there for anybody that looks. So China is a separate question. Obviously, we have foreign policy reasons that we might want to change relationships with China. I understand that very well. Although I think you do have to ask. We've had tariffs on China since 2018. That's 7 years. Has their behavior improved? Is the world safer than it was in 2018? Are they less likely to steal our intellectual property or make a move on Taiwan or in the South China Sea? I'm not sure there's any evidence for that. And a policy that's been in effect for 7 years ought to show some results. So we have a larger trade deficit than we did 7 years ago. And we have a China that's still a bad actor. So how are we better off? I don't know the answer to that question.
How do you get
Anybody else?
how do you get the kind of the masses to understand, if we go back to when you were a boy, we got a lot fewer farmers these days. You all are growing a lot more stuff than your grandparents' generation because each generation gets better than the one before, right? No offense to your grandpa, but you keep learning technology, you keep learning all these skills, collectively growing more stuff, and fewer people are doing it. But because of that, you have fewer and fewer people who truly understand what it's like when you're sitting there at the end of the day after you put your 14 hours in and you're trying to gameplay what the year is going to look like. You've already got, we kind of made a joke about this, but it's not really all that funny because you've dealt with it for decades, but you never know what the weather's going to be like, right? Yeah. I mean, you need some freaking rain. There was no snow over the winter. You barely had any rain. You need some rain. And, you're used to that stress because you never know what that's going to be like. But how do you get the masses and maybe the politicians to understand what it's like for you when you're thinking about fertilizer from Canada, you're thinking about your flower pots from China, and unless there are exemptions here, you're going to get screwed up here, you're going to get screwed over here, and you always got the weather to screw you, plus the markets are always the uncertainty. Like, how do you get people to process how tough all this is?
well, I don't know that you do. You do hope that people would take into account the costs of uncertainty, and they're impossible to quantify, but they're high. I mean, I need to be able to plan my cash flow. I need to be able to try to decide what it's going to cost to put in next year's crop, what it's going to cost to grow the flowers in the greenhouse. I have to, I only get to set prices in the greenhouse once a year. Mm-hmm. I'm constrained by my competitors, but it isn't like a commodity market where I, like corn, where I look in the paper and pretty well figure out what I'm going to get paid.
Yeah.
It's a negotiation process, but it only happens once a year. So the minute I say, okay, I'm going to do that for $1, then that's it. That's what I'm going to get. And I have to take into it. So if costs rise for any reason, I'm going to swallow it. So that's really a concern. So we have to have the ability to think ahead and plan. So the uncertainty is a huge issue. And I'm not sure that people understand how important that is to any kind of business, whether it be farming or any other business.
Why do you stick with corn and beans? Isn't that stressful all the time? You said, how'd you phrase it at the early part of this conversation? The way you look at, you get a couple of good years here and then you get 5 survive years. What was your analogy?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the way it is. Well, it's a cyclical business.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I try not to, I complain about it to other farmers, but I try not to complain about it elsewhere. We signed up for this deal, right? Yeah. I mean, it was no surprise to me that when I graduated from college, came back to the farm, that that very first summer I came back was 1978, and it rained all summer, and we lost a third of our corn crop to flooding. That was like, well, here you are, big boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can remember, and it stuck with me all this time. I was in a pickup with my dad, and I said, well, how do you deal with the fact that that we're losing our crop? And he said, look, we got it planned on time, had pretty good weed control, had enough fertility there to grow a good crop. He said, the rest of it's out of our control. And he said, you can't worry about it. And much easier said than done, but very true.
So you're not a fan of tariffs, obviously. Can there be any positive out of this, do you think?
No. I mean, that's obviously a pretty broad statement.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I mean, one of the I think misconceptions that a lot of people have had is that we lived in some kind of totally libertarian free trade regime 7 years ago, and then now we're finally fixing that. Well, we didn't. Um, one of my friends who's full on supporter of President Trump was posting all the high tariffs that people had on very individual countries had on American ag products. Very true. Obviously, a thing that we've been working at in trade negotiations for a very long time. And I wrote back, now do sugar, steel, and I don't even remember what the third one was. Pickup trucks. Hell, we got a $25,000 tariff on pickup trucks. But that's why pickup trucks cost so much, because we protect them, right? Light trucks. There's a special carve out that we've had for 40 years. We protect, sugar in the U.S. costs twice the world price because sugar growers have a good lobby. So we never have been totally free traders. We've obviously had a good economy without having totally free trade. We're always going to protect certain industries. And I got good friends that grow vegetables in Florida, and they may need a little protection, and I get it. We want to protect that industry. So we're never going to be pure. The economy can thrive pretty well with us protecting certain industries. And that's what we'll continue to do, even if we had a free trader as president. But what we're doing now is something much more extreme than that, and it's going to have huge costs.
So what should we be doing? What do you want to see our national policies be? You got Congress right now as we talk in mid-May, trying to figure out budget stuff, which, as we know, historically they don't seem to do a very good job of figuring out how much they got coming in versus how much they spend, since we go in the hole all the time. But they're looking at making cuts here and there, and they're looking at additional tax cuts in the future, maybe even bigger than what they did in Trump 1.0. What do you want them to talk about specifically when it comes to ag?
What would be my ideal policy? Well, the first thing I'd say is for us to come out and say, gosh, we screwed up. Let's sign the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. That would be a good start. We're doing all this negotiation with all these countries, and I guarantee you we will not be in as good a position as we could have been in 2016 if we just signed the damn thing. So that's the start. We're spending way too much money. We can't sustain it. Now, I will say this, I would have said the same thing 10 years ago, and clearly I would have been wrong. So that's one strongly held belief I've had for a very long time, that we were headed towards some sort of financial problem because of the debt. Obviously, we can stand a lot more debt than I thought we could. But at some point, it ends, and bond prices start getting real weak, and we find out. I mean, that's why Trump put it wasn't the stock market that put the pause on the Trumps. It was on the tariffs. It was the decline in bond prices, increase in interest rate, because all at once people didn't want to buy treasury bills. And if that ever happens, we have a huge problem. Incidentally, if we ever did have the fiscal discipline to cut the deficit, that's the one sure way of reducing the trade imbalance. Our trade imbalance, our trade deficit, is a result of our consuming more than we produce, and we do that when we borrow $2 trillion a year to run the government. You want to end the trade deficit. If that's important to you, then cut that budget deficit in half, and all at once there's going to be we'll find out that the trade deficit improves as well. Because after all those dollars that we're shipping overseas come back, right? They come back one way or another. They either come back for imports or they come back as investment in the U.S. And a lot of that investment is treasury bills. We have fewer of those to sell. Then we'll have fewer dollars floating around or having to come back. And we'll have more exports and fewer imports. And that's the only sure way. Well, there's two sure ways to solve the trade deficit. One is to increase savings and decrease consumption, and the other one is to have a recession. because the last time it dropped was in 2008. That was great. I mean, and we didn't feel better off, I guarantee you.
All right, let's end something with tell me why you do this. I mean, you can deep dive on all this stuff, which you've just done over the last half hour. You know ag, you know finance, you know your history, you're watching international foreign relations, all this stuff. I mean, you could call it a day. Why don't you?
Well,
I mean, there's something in this that keeps driving you.
oh gosh,
I'm going to get philosophical on you.
yeah, well, as far as the farming goes, I enjoy it, and we have, we got a family and we've got business, and I think I'm pretty sure I spent 10 years as president of Missouri Farm Bureau, so I was away a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm back, and I'm not sure that the kids are totally happy about that situation.
About you being back?
Oh God! But they do need my labor in order for it all to function the way it is, and as far as the other stuff, I've been writing about this stuff and talking about it since I started farming, and I just found it endlessly fascinating, and so that's why I keep doing it, because my favorite quote is, well, I have several, but one of them is, there's a lot of run in a nation, a lot of run in a nation. So in other words, you worry about all these problems,
Mm-hmm.
but one thing about doing this for as long as I've done it is, we'll get through this. We always do. America's the best. Warren Buffett has said a lot of smart things, but the smartest thing he ever says, he says, when you're born an American citizen, you've just won the biggest lottery ticket ever. And I believe that with all my heart. So this is a good place to be, and a good time to be here. Despite all the problems and the challenges and all that, I wouldn't trade my life for the life my grandfather had when he was 68. There's a lot of things that are a whole lot better, even though he was a successful farmer and had good health and all that stuff. He wasn't riding in a air-conditioned tractor listening to gas on his iPhone, that's for sure.
Amen to that. And this kind of goes full circle back to that conversation your dad had with you in 78, right?
Yeah.
Way too much rain, but has a way of put it in perspective about you do what you can do and you keep pushing on.
Yep, that's it.
Well, I appreciate you.
When you just saw 3 grandkids graduate on the same day, and I think there were three of them, the top 6 students in their class, they were 3 of them, and so must be doing something right. So that's pretty good. So the rest of it doesn't really matter if they stay, if they're productive citizens and stay out of jail, and like I say, don't end up being lawyers. It'll all be good.
Hey, we need lawyers too, though.
Pretty well.
Hey, thank you. We really appreciate the time. Thanks for the insight.
You bet. Thank you.
Have to say, totally kidding about the lawyers out there. I have 2 of them in my family, so nothing but love for lawyers here on the podcast. Now, you can learn more about Blake in our profile piece about him and find that in the American Farmland Owner newsletter. It's our weekly commitment to farmers, investors, and the ag curious. You can find thoughtful conversations, insights, trends, and challenges. It's the place where landowners get their news. Go there now, AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. Thanks for listening. Thanks for helping us grow here on the podcast. And thanks for caring about the future of our farmers.